Tonight, we're not here to fix anything, not to understand everything, not to become someone better before you're allowed to rest. This is a quiet space where we gently let go and return to inner peace through soft Zen stories inspired by the Buddha, shared slowly so your mind can soften and your body can rest. Maybe today asked a little too much from you. Too many thoughts, too many worries, too many small things you tried to hold together. And maybe, just for this moment, you're ready to set them down. Here, you don't need to improve yourself. You don't need to solve tomorrow. You are already enough simply by being here, breathing quietly. Just for a moment. Where are you listening from tonight? Wherever you are, I'm grateful you're here, sharing this quiet space. Let your breath slow as if it remembers the way home. Let your shoulders soften like they no longer need to carry the world. Tonight, we'll listen to a simple story. A story from ordinary life, carrying a small thread of Zen and Buddhist wisdom. Not to give you more to think about, but to help you loosen your grip. Because suffering rarely ends by force. It softens when we stop holding it so tightly. There's nothing to rush, nothing to achieve, only a gentle drifting into rest, into stillness. Whether you stay awake or slowly fall asleep, this moment is already enough. And now, we begin tonight's journey with these Zen stories. The bathroom light is too bright, but she leaves it on anyway. It's the only way to see what she's doing. The kid is in the tub splashing gently with a plastic cup, making little waves that hit the sides and fall back again. The water is warm, the air is damp, and the mirror is already starting to fog around the edges. She kneels on the bath mat with a towel folded across her lap. One hand on the faucet, adjusting the temperature, the other steadying a bottle of shampoo so it doesn't tip. She moves in small, practiced motions, the kind you learn when you're doing 3 things at once without wanting it to feel chaotic. She's tired. Not the dramatic kind of tired where you're falling asleep standing up. The quieter kind. The kind that shows up in your shoulders, in the way your eyes stay a little tense, even when you're smiling, in the way your thoughts don't fully stop when the day is over. The kid laughs at something, maybe a bubble, maybe nothing. She laughs too automatically. It comes out soft. Real enough. She reaches into the tub and scoops a bit of water onto the kid's arm to rinse off soap. The water beads on the skin and runs down in thin lines. For a second, she watches it like she's never seen water before. A drop. Small, clear, unimportant looking. Her mind does what it often does when she's tired. It starts measuring. How much she did today, how much she didn't do, the messages she didn't reply to, the groceries she forgot, the fact that she still hasn't scheduled that appointment she keeps meaning to schedule, the way she snapped a little earlier when she didn't want to. She hates that part of herself, the part that keeps score, the part that acts like life is a test she's quietly failing. She takes a breath through her nose slow and looks back at the tub. The kid is making soup with bath toys, stirring the water with complete confidence. The plastic cup dips and rises, and the water keeps responding, patient and endless. It's strange how something so ordinary can feel so big when you're worn down. She wipes a bit of water off the kid's cheek with her thumb. The skin is warm, alive, right here. On the edge of the tub, a drop of water clings to the porcelain. It trembles slightly when the kid kicks. It holds on, then finally lets go, sliding down and disappearing into the bath water. And something in her shifts. Not like a breakthrough, more like a widening. She's been feeling lately like she's just one drop. One small person with limited energy, limited patience, limited time. A drop trying to handle an ocean of needs. Work, home, relationships, bills, expectations. The constant background noise of the world. No wonder she feels like she's not enough. A drop is not enough to be an ocean. But that's the wrong comparison. Because a drop isn't separate from the ocean. It's ocean in a smaller shape. The thought comes quietly without any spiritual language attached. Just a simple recognition, like remembering something she knew as a kid and forgot when life got complicated. She looks at her hands. They're damp. A little pruny at the fingertips from water. Not perfect hands. Hands that have done dishes, wiped noses, typed emails, held steering wheels, carried bags. Hands that have tried. She's been treating herself like a single unit that has to perform perfectly to deserve rest. Like her worth depends on how clean she keeps everything, how calm she stays, how much she can hold. But what if she's part of something larger than her daily performance? Not larger in a mystical way. Larger in the way life is larger than one moment. Larger than one bad day. Larger than one sharp tone. Larger than one mistake. A drop can look small when you isolate it. But when you see where it belongs, it stops being small. The kid splashes again, sending a wave over the edge. Water spills onto the floor. She reaches for the towel and wipes it up. No panic, no frustration, just a quick cleanup. She notices that she didn't get mad, not because she's enlightened, because she's tired enough to stop insisting everything be perfect. The floor can be wet for a moment. The world doesn't end. The towel handles it. That feels like a clue. Maybe she doesn't have to clamp down so hard on every detail to be okay. She rinses the kid's hair, watching suds run down and dissolve into the water. Soap is there, then it's gone. The water stays. She thinks about all the feelings she's had today, irritation, guilt, worry, and how she keeps assuming they're permanent. How she keeps acting like each emotion defines her, like each moment is a verdict. But emotions are more like soap. They show up, they swirl, and they dissolve. Something stays underneath them, something wider. She reaches for the cup and pours warm water gently over the kid's head. The kid squeezes their eyes shut and squeals, then laughs again. The sound bounces off the tile walls and lands in her chest, softening it. She looks at the water again, not as a task, as a reminder. She's not just a drop trying to survive the ocean. She's the ocean showing up as a drop, and that changes how the weight feels. She drains the tub slowly. The water circles the drain, pulling the remaining bubbles into a small spinning pattern before they disappear. The sound is steady and familiar, something she's heard hundreds of times before. Tonight she watches it a little longer than usual. The kid steps out wrapped in a towel, warm and clean, and already reaching for pajamas. She dries small arms and legs, the movements automatic now learned through repetition. When she finishes, the kid runs off toward the bedroom, leaving behind a trail of damp footprints that fade as quickly as they appear. She stays in the bathroom for a moment. The mirror is fogged over completely now. She wipes a clear circle with her sleeve and looks at her reflection. Her face looks the same as it always does at this hour. Tired eyes, slight crease between her brows, hair pulled back without much thought. She notices the urge to evaluate, to decide whether she looks okay, whether she looks like someone who has it together. She lets the urge pass. Instead, she looks at herself the way she looked at the water, without narrowing the frame too much. She sees someone standing in a warm room after a long day still showing up. Someone whose energy isn't endless, but whose care keeps finding a way to move. Someone who has been measuring herself as if she were alone when she isn't. She turns off the light and walks down the hallway, following the soft sounds of bedtime routines. Pajamas rustling, a book being dropped, a voice asking a question that doesn't need a perfect answer. Later, when the lights are off and the house finally quiets, she sits on the edge of the couch with a glass of water in her hand. She takes a sip and feels it move easily down her throat, no effort required. It's strange how much she's resisted ease. She's been telling herself that if she relaxes too much, things will fall apart. That if she doesn't keep track of every detail, she'll fail someone. That if she stops holding everything tightly, she'll be exposed as not enough. But water doesn't work like that. It holds what it can, releases what it can't, and keeps moving anyway. She thinks about the times today she felt overwhelmed, how those moments felt total while they were happening, like the whole truth. And yet, here she is now, breathing normally, the day already thinning at the edges. The feelings didn't last. They never do. She's been confusing intensity with importance, treating every emotional surge as a final statement about who she is. But an ocean doesn't become small just because a wave rises. She rests her head back against the couch and closes her eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to stop scanning. Her body settles into the cushions without instruction. She notices her breath again. In, out. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels sufficient. There's relief in realizing she doesn't have to hold herself together as a single point. She doesn't have to be perfectly calm, perfectly kind, perfectly patient to be worthy of rest. She's allowed to have ripples. She's allowed to have storms. None of it takes away the depth underneath. She finishes the water and sets the glass on the table. A small ring of moisture forms beneath it. She wipes it away with her sleeve, then smiles faintly at herself. Some habits stay. She stands and turns off the last light the house slipping into darkness without resistance. In the quiet, she feels something steady beneath the usual noise of her thoughts. Not confidence, not certainty, just space. Enough space to hold tiredness without judgment. Enough space to let the day be what it was without turning it into a verdict. Enough space to remember that she belongs to something larger than any single moment. As she heads toward bed, she doesn't try to carry the ocean with her. She doesn't need to. It's already here. The notebook is still blank. Not completely blank, there are a few words written at the top of the page, crossed out once then twice. The pen rests beside it, uncapped, drying out slowly. He sits at the small desk near the window chair, pulled in close shoulders, slightly forward like he's trying to make himself smaller. Outside, the afternoon moves on without him. Cars pass, someone laughs, a door closes. Ordinary sounds that don't ask him what he's doing with his life. He's been staring at the page for longer than he wants to admit. This was supposed to be the moment things became clearer. The plan, the direction, the answer to the question people keep asking in polite ways, so what's next? He doesn't know. And that feels heavier than it probably should. He taps the pen against the paper, then stops. The tapping makes the silence feel louder. His mind keeps offering suggestions, write something, anything, but none of them feel honest. Every word he considers sounds like a role he'd be stepping into, not a truth he's discovered. He's tired of pretending certainty. On the corner of the desk sits a small block of wood. Pale, smooth in places, rough in others. It came with a cheap shelf he assembled months ago, an extra piece that never found a use. He kept it without knowing why. He picks it up now and turns it in his hands. It doesn't look like much. No markings, no clear purpose, just a solid, quiet presence. It fits in his palm easily, weight evenly distributed, not asking to be anything more than it already is. He thinks about how uncomfortable people get when they hear he hasn't figured things out yet. How quickly they try to help by offering labels, paths, suggestions, as if being undefined is a problem that needs immediate fixing, as if potential only matters once it's named. He's internalized that discomfort more than he realizes. Every time he pauses, every time he chooses not to rush into a decision, there's a voice that tells him he's falling behind. That being unshaped means being unworthy. The block of wood doesn't seem to care. It doesn't apologize for being unfinished. It doesn't lean toward any particular outcome. It simply exists complete in a way that doesn't depend on form. He sets it down on the desk and looks at it from a distance. In this light, the grain is visible, thin lines running in different directions, subtle variations that would guide any carving done later. The wood already knows how it wants to be shaped. It just hasn't been forced yet. That thought stays with him. He's been treating this in-between space like a failure, like wasted time, like a gap he should rush through to get to the real version of himself waiting on the other side. But maybe this space is doing something important. Maybe not being defined yet is what keeps his options alive. He leans back in the chair and lets it creak. The window is open just enough to let in a cool breeze. It brushes his face, then passes on. No announcement, no demand. He notices how tense his jaw is and lets it loosen. A small shift, nothing dramatic. He's spent years absorbing the idea that worth comes from clarity. From knowing who you are, what you do, where you're going. That uncertainty is something to hide, something temporary, something to overcome as quickly as possible. But the block of wood has no anxiety about its future. It doesn't rush to become a table leg or a frame or a handle. It holds its shape and trusts that when the time comes, it will be shaped in a way that fits its grain. He runs his thumb along one edge, feeling the slight roughness there. Not a flaw, just unfinished. For the first time in a while, he considers the possibility that he doesn't need to decide anything today. That not knowing might be a form of honesty rather than weakness. He looks back at the notebook. The blank page doesn't feel as hostile now. It feels spacious, like a field that hasn't been planted yet, not because it's useless, but because it's waiting for the right season. He closes the notebook without writing another word. Not because he's giving up, because he's allowing something to remain uncut. And that, for now, feels right. He doesn't open the notebook again that evening. Instead, he carries the block of wood with him into the kitchen, setting it down on the counter while he pours a glass of water. It looks slightly out of place there next to everyday things: keys, a folded receipt, a phone charging quietly, but it doesn't seem uncomfortable. Neither does he. He's used to feeling like pauses need to be justified, like stillness has to be productive to be allowed. If he isn't actively choosing improving or defining himself, then he must be wasting time. That belief has followed him for years, shaping how he moves through even the smallest gaps in his day. But tonight, there's no urgency pressing against him. He picks up the block again and turns it slowly. The light from the kitchen fixture catches the grain in a different way, now revealing subtle lines he hadn't noticed before. Some run straight. Others curve unexpectedly, changing direction midstream. If someone tried to carve against that grain, the wood would split. It would resist. He thinks about how often he's done exactly that. Chosen paths because they sounded right, not because they felt right. Forced himself into rhythms that looked good from the outside but left him tired and hollow. Pushed through discomfort not because it led somewhere meaningful, but because stopping felt like failure. He sets the block down and leans against the counter, crossing his arms loosely. There's a faint hum from the refrigerator, steady and unremarkable. The house feels neutral tonight. Not comforting, not cold, just present. It occurs to him that he's been afraid of this stage, not knowing, not being decided, because it doesn't offer quick reassurance. There's no applause for potential, no validation for staying open. And yet, something about this openness feels protective. Once wood is carved, there's no going back. Once a decision is made, it carries momentum. There's shape, direction, expectation. All useful things, all limiting too. The uncut block holds everything. He realizes he's been mistaking pressure for progress, believing that if he doesn't narrow himself quickly, life will pass him by. But life hasn't been waiting impatiently on the other side of certainty. It's been happening all along, right here, in the unremarkable moments. He keeps trying to rush through. He moves to the sink and rinses the glass, setting it upside down to dry. Water beads on the counter and spreads into thin temporary lines before disappearing. No trace, no record. And yet the act mattered. He glances back at the block of wood. There's relief in understanding that he doesn't need to be defined to be real. He doesn't need a finished identity to belong to his own life. He's allowed to be in a state of readiness rather than arrival. The thought doesn't solve anything. It simply loosens the grip of the question. Later, he sits on the couch, the block resting on the coffee table in front of him. He doesn't reach for it this time. He lets it be there without interaction. The room dims as the evening settles in shadows stretching quietly across the floor. His phone lights up once with a notification. He checks it, then sets it back down. Whatever it is can wait. There's nothing he needs to respond to about who he's becoming. For the first time in a while, the future doesn't feel like a demand. It feels like space. He leans back and closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of the house pipes clicking distant traffic, the low whir of something electrical. Ordinary signals that time is moving, even when he isn't pushing it. He thinks about how much of his worth he's placed on outcomes, on being legible, on being easy to understand, as if mystery were a flaw instead of a phase. But the uncut block is not confused. It is patient. It knows that being untouched is not the same as being empty, that waiting is not the same as stagnation, that there's a difference between refusing to move and allowing things to take shape in their own time. He opens his eyes again and looks around the room. Nothing has changed, and yet the pressure he brought into the evening is no longer sitting where it was. He doesn't feel inspired. He feels permitted. Permitted to be unfinished. Permitted to be undefined. Permitted to trust that when it's time to shape his life, the grain will guide his hands. For now, he leaves the block exactly as it is, uncut, unrushed, whole. The laundromat smells like warm detergent and metal. Not unpleasant, just familiar. The kind of place that exists more for function than comfort. Rows of machines line the walls, most of them humming some rattling slightly out of rhythm. The floor is clean, but permanently stained, marked by years of small spills no one remembers anymore. They sit on a plastic chair with a basket at their feet, watching clothes tumble behind thick glass. Shirts, towels, socks, everything mixing together, colors blurred by motion. It's late enough that the room is mostly empty. A man in the corner folds slowly, one item at a time. Someone else scrolls on their phone with headphones in. No one looks at anyone for too long. There's an unspoken agreement here. Everyone is tired. Everyone just wants to finish and go home. They pull a hoodie from the basket and notice a smear of something dark along the sleeve. Clay, maybe, or dirt. Hard to tell. It's dried, encrusted slightly, as if it's been there longer than today. They frown. All day it's felt like that, like something has been stuck to them without permission. Other people's moods, a tense conversation, a look that lingered just long enough to make them question themselves. None of it dramatic, just enough to feel off. They rub at the stain with their thumb. It doesn't come off. A familiar thought rises quiet, but sharp. Why do I always look like this by the end of the day? Not just the clothes, the feeling. They've learned to present well, to be capable, to keep things together. But by night there's always residue, fatigue, self-doubt, a sense of being worn down by contact. The dryer buzzes loudly, startling them just a little. They stand, unload warm clothes, and move to the folding table near the window. The surface is smooth, cool in spots where no one has touched it recently. As they fold their hands, move automatically. Years of repetition, the mind drifts. They remember something they once heard, maybe in a story, maybe in passing, about a golden statue hidden under layers of clay to protect it from thieves. The gold had been covered over, made ordinary on purpose. Over time, people forgot what was underneath. They treated it like dirt. Until one day, the clay cracked. They'd liked that story when they first heard it, thought it was comforting. Lately, it feels more uncomfortable than inspiring. Because what if the clay never cracks on its own? What if people only ever see the outer layer? They fold another shirt, smoothing the fabric carefully, as if doing so might smooth something else too. There's a tension in their chest they've grown used to. Not panic, just a low-grade bracing. Like they're always preparing for judgment, even in places where no one is really watching. They catch their reflection in the darkened window. Fluorescent lights above night behind the glass. Their face looks flat in this lighting, washed out. Tired, they turn away. It's easier not to look too closely. The thought comes again, softer this time. Maybe this is just who I am. The outer layer, the roughness, the unremarkable version. Maybe there was never anything precious underneath. Maybe the story was just a story. They feel a flicker of sadness at that. Quick, contained. They've learned not to linger there. The machines continue their steady noise. Clothes tumble. Time passes. They finish folding and place everything neatly back into the basket. The hoodie with a stain goes in last. They hesitate, then leave it as it is. No scrubbing, no fixing, just folded like the rest. There's something tiring about constantly trying to clean yourself up. As they lift the basket and head for the door, they feel the familiar weight settle back onto their shoulders. The day hasn't ended yet. There's still a drive home, still things to prepare for tomorrow. But the image of the statue stays with them, gold covered in clay, not damaged, just hidden. They step out into the cool night air. The door closes behind them with a soft thud. For a moment they stand still, breathing, basket balanced on one hip. They don't feel golden, but they don't feel broken either. Just layered. And something about that feels unfinished rather than lost. The drive home is quiet. Streetlights pass in slow intervals, lighting up the windshield for a second before fading again. The basket sits on the passenger seat, steady, familiar. Nothing about the night feels urgent. It's just moving forward one block at a time. At a stoplight, they glance down at their hands on the steering wheel. The skin looks dry and the glow of the dashboard, faint lines visible around the knuckles. Hands that have worked all day, held things together. Let go of things that didn't need to be held anymore. They think again about the clay. How it didn't appear overnight. How it must have been applied carefully, layer by layer, to protect something valuable from being taken too soon. How at first it probably felt heavy, uncomfortable, but necessary. They've had layers like that too. The careful tone they use in difficult conversations. The way they keep emotions contained, tidy, easy for others to handle. The habit of being useful, agreeable, low maintenance. Those layers didn't form because something was wrong inside. They formed because at some point it wasn't safe to be fully seen, or fully felt, or fully honest. Clay is not an accident. It's a response. They pull into the driveway and turn off the engine. The house is dark except for a small light in the hallway. Inside, everything is still. Shoes by the door, mail on the counter, a familiar quiet that doesn't ask questions. They carry the basket in and set it down near the couch. One hoodie slips out slightly, the stained sleeve visible again. They pause, then pick it up. This time they look at it differently. Not as something dirty, as something that's been out in the world. They think about how quickly they label parts of themselves as problems. How fast they assume the outer layer is the truth. As if exhaustion equals emptiness. As if roughness means lack. But clay doesn't erase gold. It hides it when hiding is needed. They sit down and rest the hoodie in their lap, fingers tracing the dried mark on the sleeve. It's stiff there, textured. Evidence of contact. Evidence of having been somewhere real. For years they've been waiting for the moment when they'll finally feel clean enough to be themselves. When confidence arrives. When doubt disappears. When they no longer need protective layers. But maybe that moment was never about removing everything at once. Maybe healing is not a dramatic unveiling. Maybe it's a slow remembering. They fold the hoodie again more loosely this time and place it on the couch beside them. The room feels calm. Not warm, not cold, just neutral enough to breathe in. They realize something quietly important. They don't need to break the clay tonight. They don't need to expose anything. They don't need to prove the gold exists. Knowing it's there is enough. The pressure to perform eases. The habit of self-inspection softens. Not gone, just less loud. They stand and put the clothes away, one drawer at a time. The rhythm is grounding. The body knows what to do even when the mind is tired. When everything is done, they turn off the lights and sit for a moment in the dark. The house settles around them. Pipes click. A distant car passes. Ordinary sounds holding the night together. They place a hand on their chest, without thinking, feeling the steady beat underneath. Reliable. Unimpressed by surface conditions. Gold doesn't need constant confirmation. It doesn't dull because of contact. It doesn't disappear because it's covered. It waits. As they head toward bed, there's no sudden confidence, no emotional swell. Just a simple shift in posture. Less guarded, less apologetic. They are not made of clay. They never were. The clay was just the way they learned to stay intact. And now, in the quiet of this room, they understand something gently and completely. What's most valuable about them has never been at risk, only hidden for a while. That's not a loss. That's protection doing its job. The wind is stronger than expected. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady enough to be noticed. It moves through the backyard, brushing past the fence, rustling the leaves of the plants lined up along the edge. Most of them barely respond. A few stiff branches creak and hold their ground. The bamboo does something else. It bends. Not all at once, not in a hurry. The tall green stalks lean with the wind bow slightly, then return to center when the air shifts again. There's no snapping sound, no resistance, just movement that looks almost practiced. He stands near the back door with a mug of tea cooling in his hands and watches longer than he means to. The day has been full in the quiet way. Meetings that weren't difficult but still required attention. Conversations where he listened more than he spoke. Small decisions that added up. Nothing worth complaining about, yet his chest feels tight anyway. He's used to that feeling. For most of his life, he's believed that being strong meant holding firm, staying solid, keeping everything contained so nothing spills out where it shouldn't. He learned early how to keep his thoughts inside, how to manage reactions, how to be the one people could rely on. Reliable doesn't bend. Reliable doesn't waver. At least that's what he told himself. The bamboo leans again, this time further. A stronger gust passes through, and the stalks bow deeply, almost parallel to the ground. For a split second, he expects to hear something crack. Nothing does. When the wind eases, the bamboo rises back up unchanged. He exhales without realizing he was holding his breath. There's something unsettling about how simple it looks. He spent years tightening himself against pressure, bracing, locking down emotions before they become visible, filling every quiet space with control so nothing unexpected can enter. He's been praised for it, for being calm, for being steady, for not making things harder than they already are. But lately that steadiness has started to feel heavy. He takes a sip of the tea. It's already lukewarm. He doesn't mind. The warmth spreads anyway. Inside the house, the clock ticks faintly. A dishwasher hums. Ordinary sounds continuing without his input. The world doesn't seem to require his constant grip the way he's assumed it does. Another gust passes through the yard. The bamboo bends again. He notices something he hadn't before. The stalks are hollow. He's seen bamboo cut open before, clean, empty centers running the length of each piece. That emptiness isn't weakness. It's what allows the plant to move without breaking. A solid trunk would snap under this kind of pressure. Hollow space gives room. The thought lands quietly without explanation. He's been filling himself for years, filling silence with answers, filling uncertainty with plans, filling discomfort with effort, as if emptiness were something dangerous that needed to be avoided. But what if the opposite is true? What if the tightness in his chest doesn't come from being too weak, but from being too full? He shifts his weight and leans against the doorframe. His shoulders drop slightly. The sensation surprises him. He didn't tell them to relax. They just did. There are things he carries that don't belong to him anymore. Old expectations. Roles he grew into because they were needed once. Habits of self-control that kept him safe, then slowly became cages. He's never questioned them. Letting go felt irresponsible, like leaving a post unmanned. But the bamboo doesn't guard against the wind. It cooperates with it. Another thought follows softer. Maybe strength isn't about staying rigid. Maybe it's about staying open. The idea doesn't demand action. It doesn't ask him to change anything tonight. It simply creates space. The wind eases. The bamboo stands tall again, green and quiet, as if nothing happened at all. He finishes the tea and sets the mug down on the counter. His hands feel looser, his breathing slower. Nothing dramatic has shifted. No insight he needs to explain later. Just a subtle release. He looks back at the yard one more time. The bamboo waits. The wind will come again, and it will bend again without fear. Something in him recognizes that rhythm, not as a lesson, as a possibility. Later that evening, the wind settles. Not completely. It still moves through the yard now and then, but with less insistence. The bamboo sways more gently, like it's breathing rather than reacting. He sits at the kitchen table with a folded towel in front of him, hands resting on either side. The house is quiet, in the way it only gets after a long day has fully ended. No expectations left hanging. No one needing anything from him right now. He notices how unusual that feels. For years, he's carried the sense that something must always be held in place. A decision, a mood, a situation that could slip if he didn't keep pressure on it. Even in quiet moments, his body stayed alert, prepared to intervene. Prepared for what he's never been sure. He looks down at his hands. The skin is dry from washing dishes earlier. Fine lines cross his palms, familiar as a map he's learned to read without thinking. These hands have fixed things, carried things, steadied other people when they needed it. They've also clenched often, without permission. He presses his palms flat against the table and feels the solid surface beneath them. It doesn't move. It doesn't need him to brace it. The simple contact sends a small signal through his arms, grounding him in a way that feels new. He realizes that much of his strength has come from holding on. Holding opinions steady, holding emotions back, holding himself together when it felt like things might unravel if he didn't. That kind of strength works for a while, but it's tiring. The bamboo outside doesn't look tired. It doesn't accumulate tension. It releases it with every movement. Each bend is temporary. Each return to center happens naturally without effort or self-congratulation. He's never allowed himself that. He's believed that if he loosens his grip even slightly, something important will be lost. That calm depends on constant control. That letting go means letting things fall apart. But nothing fell apart when he stopped watching the yard. Nothing fell apart when he set the mug down and walked away. Nothing fell apart when he leaned instead of braced. The realization isn't comforting at first. It's unsettling. if the world doesn't require his constant tension? Then how much of his effort has been unnecessary? He sits with that question for a moment, not trying to answer it. The towel stays folded. The clock ticks. Outside, a light breeze passes through again, and the bamboo responds as it always does. He thinks about the hollow center, about how empty space isn't absence, it's allowance. It's what lets movement pass through without damage. It's what keeps the stalk intact when pressure arrives. He's spent so much time filling himself with responsibility that there's been no room left to bend, no room to feel without fixing, no room to listen without planning a response, no room to rest without guilt. He doesn't need to empty himself completely. He just needs to stop packing himself so tightly. He stands and moves to the sink, rinsing his hands under warm water. The sensation is simple and grounding. Water flows over his skin, then disappears down the drain. Nothing held, nothing saved. He dries his hands and notices how natural the motion feels. Letting go isn't dramatic, it's practical. Back at the table, he sits again, posture easier now. Not slouched, just unforced. His breath moves without instruction, in and out. No commentary. He understands something quietly important. Being open doesn't mean being weak. Being hollow doesn't mean being empty. It means there's space for life to move through without breaking him. The wind outside fades completely now. The bamboo stands still, not rigid, just resting. Tomorrow there will be pressure again. Expectations, conversations, moments that ask something of him. He knows that. The world hasn't changed. But the way he meets it might. He doesn't need to harden to be strong. He doesn't need to brace to be steady. He doesn't need to fill every space to be whole. He turns off the kitchen light and walks down the hallway, the house settling into darkness behind him. The bamboo remains where it is, rooted and flexible, ready for whatever comes next. And for the first time in a long while, he feels the same. Not because he's holding himself together, but because he isn't. The rain has already stopped, but the street still looks wet. Puddles sit in the cracks along the sidewalk, reflecting a sky that can't decide what it wants to be. Gray clouds hang low, thick enough to make the afternoon feel like it's wearing a heavy coat. The air smells clean, like the world just got rinsed. They walk without a destination, hands in their pockets, shoulders slightly forward, not because it's cold, but because the posture matches the mood. Earlier today, something small happened that didn't feel small. A short email, a quick comment, a rejection that was polite enough to be forgettable and sharp enough to sting anyway. Nothing dramatic, no shouting, no disaster. Just a quiet message that landed in the exact spot where doubt already lives. They've been carrying it around all day, like a stone in a pocket. Every time they paused, they could feel it. The weight, the reminder, the story their mind wanted to tell. See, you're not as good as you thought. You're behind. You missed your chance. You're not built for this. They know that voice. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It has years of practice. It sounds reasonable. It uses facts, half-facts, old memories, and a tone that makes everything feel settled and final. They step around a puddle and keep walking. Shoes make a soft, damp sound against the pavement. A car passes slowly, tires hissing on the wet road. No one looks at them. No one knows what happened today. That's part of what makes it hard. When something hurts quietly, it feels like it must be personal, like it only happens to you. Like everyone else got the memo on how to be confident and you somehow missed it. They reach the corner and stop at the crosswalk. The light is red. They wait, watching the clouds drift above the buildings. The sky looks completely covered. No blue, no bright edge, just gray layered over gray. For a second, it feels like the day will stay like this forever, like the clouds are permanent, like the sun is gone. Then they remember something simple. The sun doesn't disappear when clouds show up. It's still there. It's just not visible. That thought is almost annoying in how obvious it is, the kind of thing people say when they're trying to be comforting. The kind of thing that can feel too small for real pain. But today, it lands differently. Because the clouds in their mind work the same way. A bad message arrives, and suddenly it feels like the truth. Like a final judgment. Like the whole story of who they are has been decided. But maybe it's just weather. Maybe the doubt is cloud cover, not the sky. They cross the street when the light changes. The walk sign flashes. They move with the crowd for half a block, then drift away again, letting people pass. They don't feel better yet. They just feel slightly less convinced. They keep walking until they reach a small strip of trees lining the sidewalk. Leaves are dripping, shaking off the last bits of rain. A branch moves in the wind and drops water onto the concrete in scattered taps. Tap, tap, tap. The sound is steady, almost patient. They stop under one of the trees and look up. The clouds are still thick, but the light has changed. Not bright, but different. A faint warmth behind the gray. A suggestion that something stronger is still working above it all. They inhale slowly. The air feels cool in the chest. They realize how much of today they've spent trying to force the clouds away, arguing with the rejection, replaying the moment, writing better responses in their head, imagining what they should have done differently, as if thinking hard enough could rewrite the sky. But clouds move on their own time. The mind, too. They rest one hand against the tree trunk, feeling the rough bark. Solid, real, not interested in their thoughts. The world continues regardless of whether they feel confident, and that strangely is comforting. Because it means their mood isn't in charge of reality. They start walking again slower now. Not because they're trying to calm down, but because the urgency has lost some of its fuel. The stone in the pocket is still there, but it's not the whole pocket. Not the whole body. Not the whole day. They turn onto a quieter street. The houses look ordinary. Lights are starting to come on in windows. Dinner smells drift out faintly when someone opens a door. Life continues. The clouds remain overhead. And somewhere behind them, unseen but steady, the sun keeps shining, like it always has. They don't check the weather app. Normally they would, out of habit, as if seeing the forecast might give some control over how the day feels. But right now, they let the sky be what it is without needing confirmation. The clouds are still there, thick and low. But the light keeps shifting. Subtle changes that are easy to miss if you're rushing. The gray softens. The air warms slightly. The afternoon moves forward without asking for permission. They walk until their legs feel pleasantly tired, then slow near a small neighborhood park. The grass is darker from the rain, almost glossy. A few people sit on benches, jackets zipped, faces relaxed in that post-rain quiet. No one looks particularly happy. No one looks defeated either, just present. They sit on an empty bench and rest their hands in their lap. The wood is cool and damp. A faint breeze moves through the trees, shaking loose a few last drops of water. They think again about the message from earlier. It hasn't changed. The words are the same. The outcome hasn't softened. What has changed is the way it sits inside them. It no longer feels like a verdict. It feels like information. That difference matters. They've spent years believing that confidence means never doubting yourself. That self-worth means feeling solid all the time. That once you find it, it stays visible like permanent sunshine. But that's never been how weather works. Even the clearest skies cloud over. Even the brightest days end. None of that means the sun is fragile. It just means the world moves. They rest their head back against the bench and close their eyes for a moment. Not to escape, just to stop scanning for signs that something is wrong. Behind closed eyes, the light still exists. Diffused, gentle. Unimpressed by whether they notice it or not, they realize how often they've treated difficult feelings as evidence, as proof that they're lacking something essential, that if confidence disappears, it must not have been real to begin with. But confidence isn't the sun, it's the weather. Some days it's clear, some days it's hidden, some days it's not the point at all. The bench creaks softly as they shift. A child laughs somewhere behind them. A dog shakes off water, sending droplets in every direction. Life continues in small, uncurated moments. They don't feel inspired. They feel grounded. Grounded in the understanding that what's steady about them doesn't depend on how they feel at any given moment. That their worth isn't switched on and off by emails, opinions, or passing clouds of doubt. They open their eyes and look up again. The clouds are breaking slightly now, not enough to reveal blue, but enough to let a brighter wash of light through. The park looks different under it, softer, more dimensional. They smile just a little. Not because everything is okay, because not everything has to be. They stand and start walking again, heading back toward home. The streetlights flicker on one by one, gentle halos forming against the darkening sky. The day is ending, whether it was understood or not. As they walk, they slip their hands out of their pockets. Their shoulders settle. The stone that's been riding with them all afternoon feels lighter now. Still there, just not in control. They think about how many times they've waited to feel confident before moving forward. How often they've postponed action until the clouds cleared completely. But the sun doesn't ask the clouds to leave before it shines. It shines anyway. They reach their door and pause, keys in hand. For a second, they look back at the sky one last time. Gray, quiet, honest. They don't need it to change. They don't need themselves to change either. They step inside, close the door, and let the day stay where it belongs. Outside, moving on. Behind everything that came and went today, something steady remains. Unseen, unbothered, still shining. And that is enough. She stood at the bus stop with her hands in her jacket pockets, shoulders slightly raised against the cold. It wasn't snowing hard. Just a few quiet flakes drifting down slow and unsure, like they hadn't fully decided to land yet. Her shift at the store had ended 10 minutes ago. 8 hours of smiling. 8 hours of folding clothes that weren't hers, fixing displays she didn't care about, answering questions she had already answered 100 times today. Now there was nothing to do but wait. She took her phone out of her pocket. Not because she needed anything, just because her hand moved there on its own. She scrolled without thinking. Someone she knew had posted a photo. A clean apartment, soft lighting, a caption about finally feeling aligned. Another post followed. A promotion, a new relationship, a weekend trip somewhere warm. Her thumb slowed. She didn't feel jealous exactly. It was quieter than that. More like a dull comparison that showed up without asking. They seem ahead. They figured it out. Why do I still feel like this? She locked her phone and stared at the dark glass for a second. Her reflection looked tired. Not dramatic. Just worn down in a way that didn't feel important enough to complain about. The bus was late. A snowflake landed on her sleeve. She didn't brush it away. It sat there for a moment, small, sharp-edged, already melting at the edges. Then another one landed nearby. And another. She lifted her arms slightly, watching them collect. They didn't look the same. One was thicker. One looked almost like a tiny star. Another was barely there at all, more suggestion than shape. She had learned somewhere, maybe in school, maybe online, that no two snowflakes are identical. That even under the same sky, falling through the same cold air, each one forms differently. At the time, it had sounded like a cute fact, something for trivia nights. Standing there now, it felt different. She thought about how often she measured herself using other people as the ruler. Their pace, their timing, their highlight moments. She realized how strange that was. Comparing two people assumed they were meant to be the same thing, formed the same way, meant to land in the same place at the same time. But even snow didn't work like that. Another flake landed on her glove. She watched it dissolve into a tiny dark spot, gone almost as soon as it appeared. It hadn't failed. It had just finished being what it was. She let her arm drop back to her side. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, a notification she didn't check. For once, she didn't feel pulled toward it. Her chest felt tight, but not heavy. More like something loosening just a little. She thought about her own days. They didn't look impressive online, no big announcements, no clean captions. But she showed up. She paid her bills. She helped customers find what they needed. She went home tired and still tried again the next morning. There were things she had survived that no one scrolling past her life would ever see. The bus lights appeared down the road faint at first. As it got closer, the snowflakes became harder to see. The glow swallowed them up. But she knew they were still there, still falling, still different. She stepped forward slightly, readying herself to board. For the first time that evening, she felt a small shift inside. Not joy, not relief, just space. Space where comparison usually sat. And in that space, there was no need to be anyone else. She sat by the window on the bus, forehead resting lightly against the cool glass. The city slid by in soft streaks of light and shadow. People around her were quiet. Someone tapped a foot. Someone else scrolled on a phone screen, glowing pale blue in the dark. She didn't feel the urge to look anymore. The bus moved through the snow without drama. No sudden turns, no rush. She watched the flakes hit the window and disappear on contact. Each one lasted only a moment, long enough to arrive, not long enough to be remembered. She wondered when she had started believing that worth had to be visible to count. At some point, she had picked up the idea that if something wasn't noticed, praised, or shared, it didn't really matter. That if no one reacted, then maybe it wasn't real. But the snow didn't seem to agree. It kept falling whether anyone admired it or not. She thought about her own life again, the parts that never made it into conversations, the nights she came home and cooked something simple just to feel taken care of, the mornings she got up even when she didn't feel ready. None of it was loud. None of it asked for approval. And yet, it was still her life. The bus stopped at a red light. Everything paused for a few seconds. In the quiet, she noticed her breathing. Slow, steady. She hadn't done anything to earn that moment of calm. It wasn't a reward. It was just there when she stopped fighting for something else. She realized something gently without force. Maybe she didn't need to add more to herself. Not more achievements. Not a better version. Not a cleaner story. Maybe she only needed to remove the things that weren't hers to carry. Other people's timelines. Other people's definitions of enough. Other people's highlights. The light turned green. The bus moved again. She imagined herself like one of those snowflakes, formed by conditions she didn't choose, shaped by moments she couldn't control, still complete in her own way, not better, not worse, just different. When the bus reached her stop, she stood and pulled the cord. The bell rang soft, ordinary. She stepped down onto the sidewalk. The snow had almost stopped now. Only a few flakes drifted lazily through the streetlight. She took a deep breath before heading home. Nothing about her life had changed in a dramatic way. No problem had been solved. But she felt less crowded inside. And for tonight, that was enough. The guitar had been leaning against the wall for months. Not broken. Not dusty enough to look abandoned. Just untouched. He noticed it one evening while turning off the lights. The room was quiet in that end-of-day way. No music, no TV, just the soft hum of the refrigerator in the other room. He reached for the lamp, then stopped. The guitar was still there, exactly where he had left it. He used to play more often, not on stages, not for anyone special, just for himself late at night when the world felt too loud. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped. There hadn't been a clear reason. Life had simply filled the space. Work, responsibilities. The tired kind of evenings where even small joys feel like extra effort. He told himself he would get back to it when things slowed down, when he felt more like himself again. He walked over and picked it up. The wood was cool under his fingers, familiar, unchanged. He sat on the edge of the couch and rested the guitar on his knee. Didn't tune it, didn't play. He just held it. A thought surfaced uninvited. What's the point? I don't even play anymore. It wasn't cruel, just practical. The kind of thought that sounds reasonable enough to believe. He looked at the strings. They were still intact, slightly dull maybe, but not ruined. He ran his thumb gently across them. A soft, uneven sound filled the room. It wasn't a song, barely a note. Still, the sound lingered for a second before fading. He noticed something then. The guitar hadn't lost its value in the silence. It hadn't become less of a guitar just because no one was listening. It was still what it was. He leaned back and thought about himself. How often he measured his worth by what he produced, by how useful he felt, by how visible his efforts were. When those things slowed down, the doubt moved in quickly. He set the guitar back against the wall gently this time. Not like an object being put away, more like something being trusted to wait. He turned off the lamp. In the dark, the room felt different. Not emptier, just quieter. And for the first time in a while, the silence didn't feel like failure. He woke up the next morning before his alarm. The room was still dim, the kind of light that didn't ask anything from you yet. For a moment, he lay there listening. The building settling. A car passing far below. Someone's footsteps in the hallway. Nothing special. And yet he felt strangely present. As he got up, his eyes moved instinctively toward the corner of the room. The guitar was still there, leaning exactly where he had placed it the night before. It didn't call to him. It didn't demand anything. It just existed. While making coffee, his mind drifted back to a familiar pattern. How quickly he judged himself during quiet periods. How easily he confused stillness with falling behind. If he wasn't creating, improving, or contributing in a visible way, he assumed something was wrong. He carried his mug back into the living room and sat down. The guitar remained silent, and that was okay. He thought about all the objects in the room that held value without constant use. The couch that didn't prove itself every day. The books that waited patiently on the shelf. The lamp that stood ready even when it wasn't turned on. None of them had to earn their place each morning. Why had he decided that he did? He realized that somewhere along the way, he had tied his worth to sound, to output, to being noticed. Silence to him had started to feel like disappearance. But the guitar showed him something else. Silence wasn't absence. It was rest. It was potential not being spent. He reached over and touched the neck of the guitar again. Not to play, just to acknowledge it. There was no pressure to return to who he used to be. No need to reclaim a past version of himself just to feel valid. The instrument didn't care how long it had been quiet. It didn't keep score. It was ready when it was ready. And so was he. He stood up, rinsed his mug, and set it in the sink. The day would begin soon. Emails, meetings, responsibilities. But something had shifted. He didn't feel the urge to prove anything before stepping into it. As he left the apartment, the guitar stayed where it was, silent, whole. And for the first time, he understood that his value worked the same way. They stood at the stainless steel sink at the back of the restaurant, sleeves rolled up, the air still warm from the dinner rush. Most of the noise had faded now. No more orders being called. No more clatter of pans. Just water and breath. A crate of vegetables waited on the counter. Carrots, green onions, and a bundle of lotus roots still streaked with dark mud. They picked one up. It was heavier than it looked. Cold. Rough in places where the dirt clung stubbornly to the skin. They turned on the tap. Water hit metal with a steady, familiar sound. Not loud, not quiet, just constant. They began to rinse the root, slowly rubbing the surface with their thumbs. Mud loosened and slid away in thin brown lines, disappearing down the drain. They had cooked lotus root many times before. Sliced thin for stir-fry, thicker for soup. Sometimes fried, sometimes braised. They knew what it looked like inside. Pale, clean, marked with small round holes like a quiet pattern. Still, every time they washed one, the contrast caught them off guard. So much darkness on the outside. Such a clean structure within. Their mind drifted, as it often did during these late moments when the body was busy and the thoughts had room to move. They thought about where they came from, about the parts of their life they didn't usually talk about. The years that felt heavy with mistakes, silence, and choices they didn't know how to explain without flinching. There were things they had buried deep, not because they were evil, just because they were painful. They rinsed again. More mud came off. They remembered how often they felt the need to clean themselves before letting anyone look too closely. As if the mess had to be gone first. As if healing required a perfect story. They had learned early that it was easier to be acceptable than honest. The water kept running. They turned the lotus root in their hands and found a stubborn patch of dirt lodged in a shallow groove. They pressed harder this time, working it loose. For a moment, they wondered why lotus grew this way at all. Why something meant to become a flower had to begin in thick black mud. It seemed unfair. Other plants reached for the sun right away. Lotus had to start where the water was heavy and the light barely reached. They paused, holding the root under the stream. Then it occurred to them quietly, without any drama. The mud wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something the lotus survived despite. It was the condition that made the lotus possible. Without that depth, without that pressure, there would be no flower later on. They felt something soften in their chest. Not relief, not forgiveness, just understanding. They set the cleaned root on the cutting board and picked up the knife. The blade met the surface with a solid, gentle sound. The first slice revealed the inside. White, even, almost delicate. Nothing about it showed where it had come from. They sliced again and again. Each piece fell neatly to the side, identical in structure, calm in its simplicity. They thought about how often they judged themselves by their beginnings, by the mess, by the years that didn't look good when lined up neatly, as if growth was only valid when it started clean, as if beauty was supposed to arrive without passing through anything difficult first. They lined the slices into a small pile. Their hands moved steadily now, practiced and sure. The body knew what to do even when the mind wandered. They realized something then. Maybe they didn't need to erase the mud from their story. Maybe they didn't need to pretend it hadn't been there. Maybe it was enough to know that it had fed something deeper, something solid, something real. They turned off the water. The kitchen felt quieter without it. They looked down at the lotus slices one more time before gathering them up. Clean, ready, and still connected to where they came from. They carried the sliced lotus root over to the stove and set the pan down gently, careful not to rush the moment. The heat was low, just enough to warm the surface without forcing anything to happen too fast. As the pieces met the pan, a soft sound rose up, steady and calm. The kind of sound that didn't demand attention, but filled the space anyway. They stood there, stirring slowly, letting the rhythm guide their breathing. In moments like this, the body remembered things the mind often forgot. That growth didn't happen all at once. That warmth worked better than pressure. That forcing only made things tough. They thought again about the years they had spent trying to outgrow their past by pretending it wasn't there, as if distance alone could erase it, as if time automatically meant healing. But standing here now, they understood something more honest. Healing wasn't about cutting away everything that had been dark or painful. It was about learning how to hold those parts without letting them define every step forward. The lotus root softened as it cooked its sharp edges, rounding out its surface, taking on a gentle sheen. Nothing about it tried to hide where it had been. And yet, it was becoming something nourishing. They felt a quiet shift inside. The parts of their life that had grown in confusion, in struggle, in silence, those parts hadn't ruined them. They had given them depth, sensitivity, a way of seeing what others missed. They had learned patience from waiting, strength from staying, compassion from knowing what it felt like to be misunderstood. These weren't flaws. They were roots. They turned off the heat and let the pan rest, steam lifting slowly into the air. The kitchen felt different now. Not because anything had changed, but because they were no longer fighting their own story. They didn't need to rewrite it. They didn't need to clean it up for anyone else. What mattered was how they carried it forward. They plated the lotus root carefully, each slice placed with intention, rather than urgency. It didn't have to be perfect. It only had to be honest. As they stepped out of the kitchen and into the cooler night air behind the building, they paused for a moment. The city sounded distant here, softened by walls and space. They took a slow breath and felt the ground under their feet. For the first time in a long while, they didn't feel the urge to escape their past or outrun it. It could stay where it was. It had already done its work, and now it was enough to keep growing. He started his night shift the same way he always did, by checking the perimeter, walking the same path he had walked hundreds of times before. The ground was damp from earlier rain, and the air carried that quiet, salty smell that only came from being close to the water. Most people were already home by this hour. Lights on, doors locked. Even the city seemed to lower its voice at night. He didn't mind working when no one was around. In some ways, it suited him. There was less to prove, less to perform. He passed a low fence and paused near the edge of the lot, where he could see the faint outline of the ocean beyond the structures. Far out in the distance, a lighthouse turned slowly, its beams sweeping across the dark with calm precision. The light didn't rush. It didn't blink for attention. It simply did its job again and again without checking who was watching. He leaned against the rail and watched it for a moment. There were nights when he wondered if his own work mattered. Security guard wasn't the kind of job people asked questions about with interest. It didn't sound impressive at dinner tables. When someone asked what he did, he usually answered quickly and moved on. Still, he showed up. Every shift, every weather, even on nights when his body felt heavy and his thoughts wandered too easily toward doubt. He checked his watch. Plenty of time left. As he continued walking, his footsteps echoed softly, steady and unremarkable. He thought about how often he measured his value by response, by praise, by someone noticing. When no one commented, no one thanked him, he sometimes felt invisible. But the lighthouse didn't seem to struggle with that question. It wasn't waiting for applause from passing ships. It didn't dim itself when the sea was empty. It shone because that was its role. That thought stayed with him as he finished his round and returned to his post. He sat down, pulled his jacket closer, and let the night settle around him. The wind moved through the open space, carrying the sound of waves breaking somewhere beyond sight. The lighthouse beam crossed the water again, briefly lighting the surface before moving on. He realized something quietly. Purpose didn't need an audience, and maybe neither did he. He sat there breathing evenly, letting the thought land without forcing it to mean more than it needed to. The night continued. The light kept turning. And for now, that was enough. Later in the shift, the temperature dropped slightly, the kind of change you felt more in your bones than on your skin. He stood up and stretched, rolling his shoulders, then walked back toward the railing where the view opened up again. The lighthouse was still there. Its beam moved in the same slow rhythm, unbothered by the passing hours, tracing a circle that never rushed and never hesitated. Watching it, he noticed how steady it was, how little it seemed to care about whether anyone was counting its turns. He thought about how different that was from the way he lived. So much of his energy went into checking reactions, reading rooms, wondering if what he did mattered enough to be seen. Even kindness sometimes felt like it needed proof. He had held doors open, covered extra shifts, listened when people needed to talk, and then quietly wondered afterward if any of it made a difference. If no one mentioned it, the doubt crept in. The lighthouse offered a simpler answer. It didn't ask the sea if it was useful tonight. It didn't adjust its light based on traffic. It simply stayed on. That realization settled in him slowly, like warmth spreading rather than a sudden flash of clarity. He wasn't meant to shine for recognition. He was meant to show up because it was his responsibility, his choice, his way of contributing to the world as it was, and that was already enough. He returned to his chair and sat down, hands resting loosely on his knees. The radio beside him remained silent, its faint static barely noticeable. For once, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt complete. He thought about tomorrow, about the small routines that would fill the hour's coffee keys, the familiar walk to his post. None of it felt heavy anymore. He understood now that worth wasn't something handed out by passing ships. It was something steady, built through presence, through consistency, through staying lit even when no one looked your way. The beam crossed the water again. He breathed out slowly. The night moved on, and he moved with it, grounded in the simple truth that doing what you are meant to do, with care and without demand, is its own kind of light. She stayed a few minutes after closing, even though no one asked her to. The clinic was quiet now, the kind of quiet that came after a long day of voices, instructions, and small talk that required constant attention. She moved through the rooms, slowly gathering trays and placing used tools into the metal basin by the sink. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. She turned on the water. It flowed over the instruments in a thin, steady stream, washing away what the day had left behind. She watched it for a moment, letting the rhythm pull her out of her thoughts. There was a faint ache behind her eyes. Not a headache exactly, more like emotional fatigue settling in. As she sorted the tools, her mind drifted back to a comment someone had made years ago. A sentence said casually, without much thought. It had landed harder than it should have. She didn't remember the exact words anymore, only the feeling they left behind. Small, exposed. She had carried that feeling with her longer than she cared to admit. Even now it surfaced unexpectedly, usually when she was already tired. It showed up as self-doubt, as the quiet urge to over-explain, as the habit of apologizing before anyone asked. She lifted a pair of instruments and placed them carefully on the tray. Metal touched metal with a soft clink. She had tried many ways to get rid of that old hurt, ignoring it, outgrowing it, proving it wrong. None of it worked for long. The water continued to run, and she let her hands rest under it for a moment, warmth spreading across her palms. She remembered something she had once read about pearls, how they weren't created from comfort, but from irritation. A grain of sand entering the shell, rubbing against something tender. The oyster didn't reject it. It couldn't. Instead, it responded the only way it knew how. By coating the irritation again and again, slowly, patiently, until the sharpness was no longer sharp. She looked down at her hands. How many times had she done the same thing, wrapped herself in competence, in politeness, in being useful? Layer by layer, she had protected the soft parts that felt too exposed to leave unguarded. She had always thought of those layers as armor, as something she needed because she was weak. Standing there now, she saw them differently. They weren't signs of failure. They were evidence of survival. The water cooled as she turned the handle slightly, bringing the stream down to a gentler flow. She breathed in and out slow and steady. The ache behind her eyes eased. She finished cleaning the last tray and set it aside to dry. The room felt lighter, even though nothing had changed. She turned off the sink. In the sudden quiet, she felt the old hurt still there, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a beginning. She dried her hands slowly and leaned back against the counter, letting her shoulders drop for the first time that day. The clinic was completely still now, as if it too was resting. She thought about how often she had judged herself for being sensitive, for remembering things others had forgotten, for carrying words longer than they were meant to be carried. She had told herself she needed thicker skin, that being affected meant something was wrong with her. But pearls didn't form in shells that felt nothing. They formed where something had been irritated, where the surface was soft enough to notice. That idea stayed with her as she turned off the lights and walked toward the exit. The hallway felt longer in the dim, but not uncomfortable. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean. She paused before getting into her car, hands resting on the door, and took a deep breath. She felt tired but not drained. She realized then that the old hurt hadn't weakened her. It had shaped the way she listened, the way she noticed when someone else felt uneasy, the way she chose her words carefully. These weren't flaws. They were layers she had built to protect something valuable. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to peel them away. She didn't have to heal by becoming harder or less affected. She could heal by being kinder to the part of herself that had learned how to cope. She started the car and pulled out of the lot, headlights cutting through the quiet street. The road ahead was familiar, unremarkable, and that felt comforting. As she drove, she let herself sit with the idea that maybe her sensitivity wasn't a problem to fix. Maybe it was the very thing that allowed something beautiful to form. Not because she chose the pain, but because she learned how to respond to it. When she reached home, she turned off the engine and sat for a moment longer than usual. No music, no phone, just stillness. She placed one hand over her chest, feeling her breath rise and fall beneath it. The hurt hadn't disappeared, but it had changed. And in that change, she felt something close to peace. Some worries don't arrive loudly. They don't announce themselves. They just stay. They sit quietly in the back of the mind while you're doing normal things, washing a cup, answering a message, driving a familiar road. And before you notice, the mind is already replaying, predicting, adjusting. Not because something is truly wrong, but because the habit of thinking has learned to stay awake. That evening, the person walked along a quiet stretch of beach. not the kind with crowds or music. Just wet sand, a pale sky, and the steady sound of water pulling back into itself. It had been a long day, the kind where nothing dramatic happened, yet everything felt heavy anyway. Too many small decisions, too many thoughts that didn't fully finish. Shoes were left in the car, bare feet pressed into the cool sand. Each step left a clear mark behind heel-arched toes perfectly shaped for a moment. The person noticed this without trying to. The mind tends to notice patterns when it's tired. Behind them, a long line of footprints stretched back toward the parking area. Ahead, the beach curved, gently disappearing into a soft gray distance. No rush to get anywhere. No reason to turn back yet. The thoughts came along, of course. They always did. Did I say the wrong thing earlier? What if tomorrow goes badly? Why do I keep thinking about this one small moment? Each question landed like another footprint, clear, defined, convincing. The mind treated each one as if it needed to be preserved, examined, solved. As if thinking harder would finally bring relief. The person stopped walking for a moment and looked down. The footprints behind were still there, but closer to the waterline, the edges were already softening. Not gone, just less sharp. The next wave rolled in quietly, reached a little farther than the last, and blurred one of the older prints almost completely. Nothing dramatic happened. No lesson arrived fully formed. Just that small, ordinary sight. When the mind is anxious, it often believes that thoughts must be held tightly, or they'll cause damage if left unattended, like something important will be lost if it isn't replayed enough times. But standing there watching the water do what water always does, something subtle shifted. The waves weren't trying to erase anything. They weren't correcting the sand. They weren't rushing. They were just moving as they had all day, as they would long after night came. The person began walking again, slower this time. The body found its own pace without instruction. Another set of footprints appeared side by side with the earlier ones. For a while, both sets existed together, the older ones fading, the new ones fresh, past and present overlapping without conflict. The mind still offered thoughts. That didn't stop. But they felt slightly less urgent now, less sharp at the edges. There's something exhausting about trying to keep every footprint intact, trying to remember every step perfectly, trying to make sure nothing ever washes away. It asks the mind to do a job it was never meant to do. A wave came in closer, touching the person's toes. Cold, brief, then gone. The body reacted before the mind did a small shift of weight, a quiet inhale. No analysis required. For a moment, attention dropped out of thinking and into sensation. The temperature of the water, the firmness of the sand, the steady sound that didn't need interpretation. Behind them, more footprints were disappearing. Not because they were unimportant, but because the beach had no need to keep records. The sand didn't argue with the water. It didn't insist on permanence. The person noticed how often their own mind did the opposite, how it tried to hold every moment in place, replaying conversations, rehearsing outcomes, polishing worries until they felt solid and real. As if anxiety itself were proof of responsibility. But standing there, nothing was being asked. No fixing, no deciding, no improvement. Just walking, just leaving marks, just letting the ocean respond in its own time. The person didn't make a promise to stop overthinking. That would have been another thing to manage. Instead, there was a quieter recognition. Thoughts don't need to be erased to lose their power. Sometimes they soften simply by not being protected. Another wave came. Another set of footprints blurred. The beach kept breathing in this slow, patient way, unconcerned with what stayed or left. The person kept walking, not toward an answer, but along the shoreline where nothing asked to be held forever. And for now, that was enough. The shoreline curved gently ahead, and the person followed it without thinking much about where it led. The light had shifted. What was once pale had deepened into something softer, closer to evening. The air cooled just enough to be noticeable, like the day quietly letting go of its grip. A few steps in, the person glanced back again, not out of concern, more out of curiosity. Most of the older footprints were gone now, not erased in a clean line, but smudged, interrupted, half-remembered. A heel here, a toe there. The rest blended back into the wide, even surface of the sand. It was strange how quickly the mind wanted to comment. That one disappeared fast. That one lasted longer. That one is still visible. Even now, the habit of measuring remained. The habit of comparing what stayed and what didn't. But the beach didn't seem to care. The waves kept their rhythm. Sometimes they reached farther. Sometimes they pulled back. There was no pattern meant to be understood, no message hidden in the timing. The person slowed again, noticing the sound more clearly now. The water didn't crash. It folded in on itself, then retreated, leaving behind a thin, shimmering layer that reflected the sky for a brief second before sinking in. Overthinking often feels like this: layers of reflection that never quite settle. One thought triggers another. One memory pulls up a dozen more. Each seems important in isolation, but together, they blur the ground you're standing on. The person bent slightly and pressed a hand into the sand. It held the shape of the palm for a moment, then softened as moisture crept in from the sides. No resistance, no effort, just a quiet change. The mind noticed, then grew quiet again. There's a particular kind of anxiety that comes from believing every thought is a signal, that if you don't respond immediately, something will go wrong. It trains the body to stay alert long after danger has passed, long after there's anything useful to do. But here, standing at the edge of the water, nothing needed a response. The person straightened and continued walking. The beach was nearly empty now. A few distant silhouettes moved slowly, each in their own quiet world. No one was watching the footprints. No one was counting them. That too felt like a relief. At some point, the person noticed that the inner commentary had thinned out, not vanished, just spaced farther apart. Thoughts arrived, then left like birds crossing a wide sky. They didn't land. They didn't stay long enough to build nests. One thought did linger for a moment. What if worries are like footprints? They appear because walking happens, because living happens, not because something has gone wrong. You don't stop walking just to avoid leaving marks. and you don't need to follow every mark once it's made. Another wave reached up, brushing the edge of a fresh footprint before it had time to harden. The print didn't disappear entirely. It simply lost its sharp outline. It became less specific, less demanding. The person felt a familiar urge to hold on to this moment, to remember it clearly, to make sure it stayed meaningful. And then almost immediately, there was a recognition of that urge itself. Even this doesn't need to be held. The beach would look different tomorrow. The tide would be different. The light would shift again. None of that depended on the person understanding it fully. There was something steady in that. The person turned back toward the parking area as the air cooled further. Each step still left a mark. That didn't change. But the need to check behind each time had faded. Trust replaced it, not a loud confidence, just a quiet allowance. Allowing thoughts to come, allowing them to go, allowing the mind to rest between waves. Near the end of the walk, the sand grew firmer. Fewer footprints showed up here. The ground held less, and the water reached this area more often. It felt like a natural boundary, one the body understood without explanation. The person paused one last time, looking out at the open water. The horizon was smooth, uninterrupted. Nothing there needed to be solved or named. The worries from earlier hadn't been defeated. They hadn't been fixed. They simply no longer asked for constant attention. Like footprints left behind on a wide beach, they were allowed to fade on their own schedule. And with that, the person headed back carrying nothing extra, leaving nothing that needed to last. Some tension doesn't feel dramatic. It feels practical, responsible, necessary. It shows up as a tight jaw while reading emails, a stiff back while standing in line, a quiet belief that if you stay firm enough, focused enough, nothing will fall apart. That afternoon, the person stood in a small backyard behind a modest house. Nothing special about it. A narrow strip of grass, a few potted plants, a string of lights still hanging from last summer unlit. The air moved gently enough to be noticed, not enough to be called wind. The person was watering a cluster of bamboo planted along the fence. The hose released a steady stream, cool and clear, darkening the soil at the base. The bamboo stalks were thin, but tall, rising higher than the fence itself. As the breeze passed through, they leaned together, then apart, making a soft rustling sound. At first, the person didn't really see them. The mind was elsewhere, reviewing a conversation from earlier in the day. A small disagreement, nothing serious. But the body had reacted anyway. Shoulders lifted, breath shortened, thoughts circling around what should have been said differently. Why didn't I explain myself better? What if they misunderstood? I should have pushed back more. The hose slipped slightly in the person's hand, water splashing onto the concrete. They adjusted their grip, tightening it, as if control over the hose might restore control everywhere else, too. The bamboo bent again with the breeze. One stalk leaned far enough that it brushed another, then gently tapped the fence before springing back upright. No sound of strain, no cracking, just movement. The person paused, noticing this now. The water kept running. The mind slowed just enough to take in the scene. The bamboo didn't resist the wind. It didn't brace against it. It moved with it. The person remembered something said once long ago. Not as advice, just as an observation. Things that survive strong weather are rarely the stiffest ones. The hose was lowered slightly, easing the pressure. The stream softened. Water pooled calmly at the base of the plants, soaking in instead of splashing outward. Inside the chest, something mirrored that change. Overthinking often grows out of rigidity. The belief that there is one correct response, one safe position, one version of events that must be defended. When the mind locks onto that idea, every alternative feels like a threat. The person realized how much of the day had been spent bracing, holding opinions firmly, holding expectations tightly, holding the body in a way that assumed impact was coming. Another breeze passed through. The bamboo leaned again farther, this time moving together like a single organism rather than separate pieces. When the air settled, they returned to center without effort. The person tried something small. Instead of replaying the conversation, they allowed the image to blur. Not pushing it away, just not gripping it so hard. It didn't disappear, but it loosened. The water shut off with a soft click. Silence settled, broken only by leaves shifting and a distant car passing on the street beyond the fence. The person set the hose down and rolled their shoulders once slowly, noticing how tight they had been. It's easy to confuse flexibility with weakness. Many people do. They imagine that if they don't hold their position firmly, they'll lose ground, lose respect, lose safety. But the bamboo didn't look weak. It looked alive. The person reached out and touched one of the stalks. It was smooth, cool, surprisingly resilient. When pushed gently, it moved. When released, it returned. The mind made a quiet connection, not as a lesson, just as a feeling. What if being okay didn't require so much resistance? What if peace wasn't about holding everything in place, but about allowing movement without panic? A memory surfaced of other moments like this. Times when pushing harder had only created more tension. Times when letting go just slightly had allowed things to resolve on their own. The person hadn't noticed how tired they were until that thought arrived. The bamboo swayed again, responding to a breeze the person hadn't felt on their own skin yet. The plants sensed it first, adjusted before impact. That too felt familiar. Sometimes the body knows before the mind does. Sometimes the best response happens without debate. The person stood there for a while longer, not thinking about the bamboo anymore, but staying with the rhythm of the yard. Light shifting, air moving, muscles gradually softening without instruction. The conversation from earlier returned once briefly, but this time it didn't demand a rewrite. It passed through like wind through leaves, leaving no damage behind. And for now, that was enough movement. As the light shifted toward evening, the backyard took on a quieter tone. Shadows stretched across the ground, and the air cooled just enough to invite a slower pace. The person remained where they were, hands resting loosely at their sides, noticing how different the body felt compared to a few minutes earlier. The bamboo continued its gentle movement. Not constant, not dramatic, just responsive. A breeze would arrive, the stalks would lean, then return. No hesitation, no argument. The mind, however, didn't move as easily. A familiar urge returned the need to make sense of things, to decide what flexibility should look like, to define when to bend and when to stand firm. The person noticed this urge without immediately following it, the way one might notice a habit forming before it fully takes over. It was subtle but important. Overthinking often disguises itself as preparation, as intelligence, as care. It convinces us that staying tense is the same as staying safe. But standing there watching the bamboo, it was clear that constant stiffness wasn't protection. It was strain. One stalk leaned farther than the others, brushing the fence again. This time the person noticed the sound more clearly. A soft tap, then nothing. The fence didn't break. The bamboo didn't crack. Both adjusted briefly, sharing space. There was something quietly instructive about that moment, even without putting words to it. The person thought about how often their own mind treated pressure differently. How a single comment could feel like an attack, how uncertainty could feel like failure, how small changes in plans could trigger a flood of imagined outcomes. The bamboo didn't imagine outcomes. It responded to what was actually happening. A breeze passed through again, slightly stronger this time. The stalks bent together, some more than others depending on where they stood. Each one responded in its own way, without comparison. The person took a slow breath in, then out, not as a technique, but because the body seemed to request it. The chest rose and fell naturally. The shoulders dropped another fraction. It became clear that flexibility wasn't about giving in. It was about staying present enough to move with what was real, instead of fighting what might happen. The person walked a few steps closer to the bamboo, looking up at how high the stalks reached. They had grown that tall not by resisting every gust, but by surviving many of them. By yielding just enough again and again. There was a quiet recognition rigidity had cost more energy than it had ever saved. The conversation from earlier in the day surfaced again, but now it felt different. Less like a problem to solve, more like a moment that had already passed. The words couldn't be edited anymore. The outcome couldn't be controlled. And yet nothing terrible had happened. The bamboo swayed once more, then settled. The air stilled. The yard felt suspended in a calm that didn't need explanation. The person noticed how often they had mistaken tension for strength. How the body had learned to stay ready even when there was nothing to brace against. Letting go of that habit didn't require force. It required permission. Permission to not be perfectly defended. Permission to not hold a single position all the time. Permission to adjust. The person stepped back, giving the bamboo space again. The hose lay where it had been set down, forgotten. The water absorbed into the soil unseen now, doing its work quietly. Somewhere nearby, a door closed. A distant voice carried briefly, then faded. Life continued beyond the fence, moving in countless ways the person couldn't track or manage. And that too felt acceptable. The bamboo would keep responding to the wind long after this moment. The wind would come and go, indifferent to how it was received. Neither needed to win. The person turned toward the house, not rushing, not resisting, just moving with the evening as it arrived. Inside, there would be more thoughts, more decisions, more moments that invited tension. That hadn't changed. What had shifted was something simpler. The understanding that peace didn't come from standing unmovable, but from learning how to bend without fear. The bamboo leaned one last time as the breeze returned, then straightened again, exactly as it always had. And the person carried that image with them, not as a rule, not as advice, but as a quiet reference point, ready to return whenever the mind began to stiffen again. Some problems don't block the entire road. They sit off to the side, visible but avoidable. And still, we manage to hurt ourselves on them. That evening, the person was pushing a shopping cart across a quiet parking lot. The store lights were bright but soft at this hour, and most cars were already gone. The air carried the faint smell of asphalt, cooling after a warm day. The cart wheels made a low, uneven sound as they rolled. It had been one of those days filled with small frustrations. Nothing worth complaining about out loud, yet enough to keep the mind busy. A delayed response. A misunderstanding that didn't get cleared up. A task that took longer than expected. None of it was urgent anymore. But the mind hadn't received that message. Near the edge of the parking lot, where the pavement met a thin strip of gravel, a large stone sat half embedded in the ground. It wasn't new. It had likely been there for years, pushed aside during construction and forgotten, big enough to notice. Small enough that most people walked around it without thinking. The cart veered slightly as one wheel bumped the stone. Not hard, just enough to jolt the handle. The person felt irritation flare instantly. Of course. Why is that even there? Without pausing, the person nudged the cart forward again, this time with more force. The wheel struck the stone more directly. The cart stopped short. The handle pressed into the palms. A sharp, unpleasant sensation shot up the arms. The stone hadn't moved. The person exhaled through the nose, annoyed now not just at the obstacle, but at themselves. The cart was pulled back. The stone sat there unchanged, indifferent. That was when it became clear how familiar this moment felt. Overthinking often works this way. A small problem appears, something inconvenient but manageable. Instead of stepping around it, the mind runs straight into it again and again, hoping force will turn it into something else. The person stood there for a second, hands resting on the cart, feeling the lingering tension in the wrists. The parking lot was quiet enough that the sound of a distant engine starting could be heard across the way. Nothing was actually blocking the path. There was plenty of space to go around. Still, the mind replayed the earlier moments of the day. The comment that felt unnecessary. The email that could have been worded better. Each thought hit with the same stubborn insistence as the cart against the stone. If I push harder, it will change. If I think it through one more time, it will resolve. The person looked down at the stone more closely now. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't threatening. Just solid, heavy, exactly what it was. Some problems are like that. They don't respond to pressure. They don't explain themselves. They simply exist. The person adjusted their grip on the cart, turning it slightly to the side. The wheels rolled smoothly this time, bypassing the stone completely. No resistance, no jolt. The body relaxed almost immediately. That small ease was noticeable. Not dramatic, but clear. The shoulders dropped. The breath slowed. The irritation didn't need to be argued with. It just didn't have anything to push against anymore. Walking toward the car, the person felt a quiet recognition settle in. How often had the day been spent pushing against things that couldn't be changed, replaying moments that were already over, pressing into worries that only grew harder with attention. The groceries were placed into the trunk, one bag at a time. Each movement was simple, mechanical, grounding. The sound of plastic bags rustling, the dull thud as they were set down. The stone remained behind, unchanged, as the cart was returned to its place. Overthinking has a way of convincing us that engagement equals control. That if we keep addressing the issue, it will eventually soften. But some obstacles aren't meant to be confronted head-on. They aren't personal. They aren't tests. They're just there. The person closed the trunk and leaned briefly against the car, noticing the cool metal through their jacket. The earlier frustrations were still present, but they no longer pressed as sharply. Not everything needs to be fixed. Not everything needs a response. Sometimes the simplest relief comes not from pushing through, but from choosing a different path entirely. The stone stayed where it was doing nothing at all. And for the first time that day, the person didn't feel the need to do anything about it. The drive home was quiet. Streetlights passed at a steady rhythm, one after another, casting brief pools of light across the windshield. The radio stayed off. The person didn't feel the need to fill the space with sound. At a red light, the mind tried to return to its old pattern, that moment earlier. That response could have been different. Maybe next time. The thought began, then paused. There was a small awareness now, like a hand hovering just before touching something hot. The recognition came gently. This feels like pushing the cart into the stone again. The light turned green. The car moved forward. The thought didn't finish its sentence. Overthinking doesn't always feel aggressive. Often, it feels responsible, like a duty to review, prepare, and prevent future discomfort. But most of the time, it's just repetition without movement. The same angle, the same pressure, the same result. At home, the person carried the groceries inside. The kitchen light came on warm and familiar. Bags were set on the counter. Keys were placed in their usual spot. The ordinary sounds of evening settled in. One bag tipped slightly, and a can rolled toward the edge of the counter before stopping. The person reached out and steadied it without irritation. No commentary followed. Just a simple adjustment. That too was noticed. The stone from the parking lot returned to mind, not as an image, but as a feeling. Solid, neutral, unmoved by effort. The realization wasn't new, but it felt clearer now. Many worries are exactly like that stone. They don't shift when kicked. They only bruise the one doing the kicking. The person leaned against the counter arms, resting loosely. There was a sense of tiredness there, but also relief. The kind that comes when you stop arguing with what is already in place. Some problems don't require solutions, they require distance. The mind tried once more to circle back. What if ignoring it makes things worse? What if going around is avoidance? The question lingered briefly, then softened. Avoidance runs from reality. Going around accepts it. There's a difference even if it takes time to feel it. Outside, a car passed, tires humming against the road. Inside, the refrigerator clicked on quietly. Life continued in these small, unremarkable ways, untouched by the earlier frustrations. The person thought about how many times the day had been spent hitting the same mental obstacle, replaying words, rehearsing explanations, expecting a different outcome from the same motion. It wasn't wrong to care. It was just unnecessary to collide. The stone wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a failure. It was simply not the path. Later, as the evening settled further, the person stepped outside, briefly standing near the front door. The street was calm. Porch lights glowed softly. Nothing demanded attention. The mind felt quieter, not empty, but less crowded. Thoughts still appeared, but they didn't line up for inspection. They passed like pedestrians crossing a wide street, each one heading somewhere else. There was a quiet understanding forming, not as a rule, but as an option. Next time something feels immovable, it might not be a signal to push harder. It might be an invitation to step aside. No effort required, no defeat implied, just a different direction. The person went back inside, closed the door, and let the evening continue without adding anything extra to it. Some stones remain by the road for years. They don't need to be moved. They don't need to be conquered. They only need to be noticed and then passed by. And that was enough. Some fears don't come from what's actually happening. They come from what the mind repeats. That night, the person was walking through a long parking garage beneath an apartment building. The concrete walls were bare, marked only by faded numbers and old tire streaks. The lighting was dim but steady, and every sound carried farther than expected. Footsteps echoed. A keychain jingled. Even a quiet breath seemed louder than usual. The person slowed without realizing it. The body reacted before the mind had time to explain why. A slight tightening in the chest, a subtle alertness in the shoulders. Nothing was wrong, but the space made it feel like something might be. The mind filled in the rest. Did you hear that? What if someone's behind you? Why does this place always feel unsettling? The person paused near a concrete pillar and glanced around. Empty. Still. Just rows of parked cars and long shadows stretching across the floor. A car door slammed somewhere above. The sound dropped down through the open levels, bouncing and returning in fragments. The person felt a brief spike of tension, then a quiet embarrassment at their own reaction. It was just an echo. But the body didn't know that immediately. It had already responded to the sound, treating it as a signal. The person continued walking, footsteps measured now, listening more carefully. Each step produced a familiar pattern. The sound went out, hit the walls, and came back slightly altered. Louder, longer, less precise. The mind noticed this and began to anticipate it. Every movement seemed to generate another response. Overthinking often works the same way. A thought appears, the mind reacts to it, then reacts again to its own reaction. Soon the original trigger is gone, but the noise remains. The person stopped and deliberately shuffled one foot across the concrete. The sound scraped loudly, then returned in layers. The person waited. No new sound followed. Silence returned quickly. That felt important, though the person didn't rush to define why. Walking again, the person remembered other moments like this. Times when a single comment lingered for hours. When one small mistake seemed to echo through an entire day. When fear multiplied simply because it had space to bounce around. The garage wasn't dangerous. It was just open. And open spaces amplify sound. The person reached the car and unlocked it. The beep echoed sharply, bouncing off the walls. For a split second, the body flinched again. Then the person smiled slightly at the familiarity of the reaction. Even expected sounds can startle when the environment is right. Inside the car, the door closed with a solid thud. The space became smaller, contained. The echoes stopped. The person sat there for a moment before starting the engine, noticing how quickly the body settled once the noise had nowhere to go. Breathing slowed. Shoulders softened. The mind followed. It wasn't that the fear had been unreasonable. It had just been amplified, reflected, repeated. The engine started. Its low hum filled the space, steady and predictable. As the car moved toward the exit, the sound of tires on concrete created another echo. But this one felt different, familiar, controlled. Overthinking often convinces us that the noise in our head is proof of danger. But much of it is just reflection thoughts, bouncing off other thoughts, growing louder each time they return. The person drove slowly up the ramp, passing level after level. With each turn, the echoes shifted, then faded. The open space behind grew distant. Outside, the night air felt different, wider, softer. Sounds didn't cling the same way. The person pulled into the street and let the car coast for a moment, windows slightly open. A breeze passed through, carrying the ordinary sounds of the neighborhood, distant traffic. A dog barking far away, someone laughing on a balcony. None of it echoed. The mind noticed the contrast. How fear had filled the garage, not because it was real, but because it had room to repeat itself. The person didn't make a promise to stop worrying. That would have been another echo. Instead, there was a simple awareness settling in. Not every loud thought comes from something solid. Some of them are just returning sounds. And for now, that understanding was enough to keep moving. Later that night, the person noticed how the garage stayed in the body longer than expected. Not as fear exactly, more like a residue, a slight readiness, a habit of listening too closely. At home, lights were dim, shoes were set by the door. The quiet here was different from the quiet underground. It didn't bounce, it settled. Still, the mind brought things back. That sound earlier, that pause, that moment of tension. The thoughts arrived clearly, as if they were still traveling through open space, waiting to return. The person sat down on the couch and let them come without pushing them away. They didn't feel dangerous now, just loud. Overthinking often survives on repetition. A thought doesn't need to be true to be convincing. It only needs to be heard enough times. In an open mental space, it can keep returning each time, sounding more important than the last. The person leaned back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. The sound was steady. It didn't echo. It stayed where it was. That difference stood out. The garage hadn't created the fear. It had just amplified it. The mind does the same thing when it's tired. When it's given too much space and not enough grounding, every worry travels farther than it needs to. One thought calls out. Another answers. Soon it feels like a conversation, even though it's just one voice hearing itself. The person tried a small experiment. They cleared their throat softly. The sound stayed close. No return. A quiet understanding followed, not as a conclusion, but as a sensation. Maybe the fear earlier hadn't been a warning. Maybe it had been a reflection. A memory surfaced from years ago, standing in a canyon during a trip. Someone had shouted just to hear the sound come back. The echo had been thrilling then, surprising, harmless. No one assumed danger. Everyone understood what it was. But in the dark garage, the same effect had felt threatening. Context mattered. The person thought about how often the mind forgets context. How a tired thought at night feels heavier than the same thought in the morning. How silence can turn small worries into loud ones when there's nothing else to absorb them. The couch creaked slightly as the person shifted position. The sound didn't return. The room held it gently. There was no need to force calm, no need to silence the mind. Just noticing where the noise was coming from changed how it landed. The worries from earlier in the day tried to reappear, unfinished conversations. Imagined misunderstandings, possible outcomes that hadn't happened yet. They showed up with the same shape they always had. But now they felt flatter, less three-dimensional, like echoes without a source. The person imagined calling out again inside that garage. Imagined the sound traveling, bouncing, returning. And then imagined simply not calling out at all. The silence that would follow wasn't empty. It was neutral. That felt important. You don't have to answer every echo. You don't have to respond to every thought that comes back louder than it left. Some thoughts only exist because they keep being answered. The person stood up and walked toward the kitchen, bare feet quiet on the floor. A glass was filled with water. The faucet turned off cleanly. The sound stopped exactly where it should. The body relaxed a little more. The garage would still be there tomorrow. The echoes would still happen if someone walked through it again. Nothing about that needed to be fixed or avoided. What had changed was the understanding of what an echo actually is. Not a warning, not a message, just sound returning in an open space. The mind too has spaces like that. Wide, hollow areas where thoughts bounce around when nothing else is present. Filling those spaces doesn't require more thinking. Sometimes it just requires contact with the body, with the room, with something solid and near. The person finished the water and set the glass down. The sound was soft, final. It didn't come back. For the rest of the evening, thoughts still appeared. But when they grew loud, the person recognized the pattern. This feels like an echo. And without effort, without argument, the sound faded on its own. The cave had never been dangerous. It had just been empty. And now, there was enough here to keep the noise from returning. Some worries feel convincing because they're true, just not complete. That evening, the person sat at a small kitchen table with papers spread out in front of them. Not a mess, just enough to feel unfinished. A bill, a printed email, a notebook open to a page with half-written thoughts. The dishwasher hummed softly in the background, steady and patient. Nothing urgent was happening. But the mind felt busy anyway. The person picked up one sheet of paper and read it again. The same lines they had already read twice. The meaning hadn't changed, but the feeling had. Each rereading brought a slightly different concern. What if this leads to something bigger? What if I'm missing something important? What if this one detail changes everything? The mind narrowed its focus until that single paper seemed to carry the weight of the whole situation. Everything else on the table faded into the background. Overthinking often begins this way, not with imagination, but with partial information. A single angle, a single piece. The mind fills in the rest, not because it's careless, but because it wants certainty. The person leaned back slightly and noticed the chair creak. The sound cut through the mental loop just enough to create space. The eyes lifted from the paper and took in the rest of the table again. There was the notebook, the other documents, the quiet glass of water near the edge. Together they told a broader story, but the mind had been gripping only one part, insisting it represented the whole. The person remembered a story heard once long ago about a group of people trying to describe something large by touching only a small part of it. One felt something thick and solid and decided it must be a wall. Another touched something thin and flexible and argued it was a rope. Each description was accurate, just incomplete. The problem hadn't been that anyone was wrong. The problem was that everyone was certain. The person set the paper down and rubbed their forehead lightly, feeling the familiar tension there. The dishwasher finished its cycle with a soft click and the hum stopped. Silence filled the kitchen. In that quiet, the mind tried to widen its view, but habit pulled it back to the same spot. This part matters most. This is the key. This is where things could go wrong. The person stood up and walked a few steps to the counter, placing the paper there instead. Distance helped. Not much. Just enough. From across the room, the paper looked smaller, less commanding. It hadn't changed, but the relationship to it had. The person realized how often worry worked like this. A single comment from someone else. One mistake. One unknown detail. The mind touches that piece and decides it understands the whole shape of what's coming. But life rarely arrives in pieces that small. The person returned to the table and opened the notebook, fully flipping back a few pages. Notes from earlier weeks appeared, concerns that had once felt urgent and now barely registered. Problems that had resolved quietly. situations that had shifted without effort. Seeing them there written down softened something inside. The current worry didn't vanish, but it lost its claim to completeness. The person gathered the papers into a loose stack, not organizing them fully, just bringing them together. The action felt grounding, physical, simple. Overthinking thrives when the mind believes it's seeing everything. But most of the time, it's only touching a fragment and reacting as if it's the entire picture. The person placed the stack slightly to the side and rested both hands flat on the table. The surface was cool and solid, real. A thought passed through quieter than the others. Maybe I don't have enough information yet. And that doesn't mean something is wrong. That thought didn't demand action. It didn't offer a solution. It simply widened the space. The person stayed there for a moment longer, noticing the kitchen as a whole again, the light above the chair legs, the counter, the window reflecting the dark outside. The worry was still present, but it was no longer alone. And for now, that felt like a more honest way to see what was actually there. The person stayed in the kitchen a little longer, not because there was more to do, but because leaving felt unnecessary. The house had settled into its evening rhythm. Outside the window, a porch light across the way clicked on, casting a soft circle onto the sidewalk. The stack of papers sat quietly on the table. Together they looked manageable. Not simple, but contained. The earlier sense of urgency had thinned, replaced by something closer to curiosity. The mind still wanted clarity, but it no longer demanded certainty. The person picked up the notebook again and flipped to a blank page. Not to solve anything, just to write a few words. Short phrases, incomplete thoughts. Nothing polished. As the pen moved, it became clear how narrow the earlier focus had been. One detail had been given too much authority. The mind had treated it as a verdict rather than a piece of information. Overthinking often mistakes partial contact for full understanding. When the mind touches one aspect of a situation, it fills in the rest with fear, memory, and habit. The picture feels complete even when it isn't. The person paused, pen hovering. The hum of the refrigerator returned steady and low. The sound grounded the moment. There was no rush to finish the page, no need to decide anything tonight. Another memory surfaced, this one from a long time ago. Standing in a museum looking at a large painting up close. From inches away, all that could be seen were brushstrokes, thick, uneven, almost chaotic. It was only after stepping back that the image made sense. The painting hadn't changed. The distance had. The person leaned back in the chair again, letting the pen rest on the page. The earlier worry felt similar, now too close to see clearly. Too focused on texture instead of form. Some questions don't open with more pressure. They open with more space. The person gathered the papers once more and slid them into a folder. Not to hide them, just to mark a pause. The folder was placed on the counter where it would be easy to find again tomorrow. That simple boundary felt respectful, honest. The mind tried once more to pull attention back to the same concern, but this time it didn't stick. The thought arrived, hovered, then drifted away, as if it had lost the echo it needed to stay loud. The kitchen felt larger now, not physically but perceptually. The edges of the room were clearer. The air felt easier to breathe. The person turned off the overhead light and left only a small lamp on. Shadows softened. The room no longer asked for scrutiny. The worry hadn't been disproven. It hadn't been dismissed. It had been placed among other things. And that placement changed everything. Overthinking feeds on the illusion of totality. When one piece is treated as the whole, the mind tightens. When pieces are allowed to sit beside one another, the grip loosens. The person moved through the house slowly, not tired, not energized, just present. Each step felt unremarkable, which was its own kind of relief. Before leaving the kitchen, the person glanced once more at the table where the papers had been. The space was clear now, not empty, just open. The picture wasn't complete yet, and that was okay. There would be more information, more context, more angles to consider. Life rarely reveals itself all at once. The person carried that understanding forward, not as a rule to remember, but as a quieter way of seeing. Touching only one part doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means the picture isn't finished. And for tonight, that was enough to let the mind rest where it was. Wherever you are tonight, I'm grateful you chose to spend this quiet time here. If these stories help you rest, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever you need a gentle place to land. And now, you don't need to do anything more. Let the night hold what you can't carry. And if sleep comes, let it come.